All right, welcome to today's Lunch and Learn, and I'm going to be talking to everybody today is about this concept of exiting the COVID Crucible. So let's just jump right in on it. And not everybody understands what a crucible is. So let's first get clear on what this is. Anybody know what a crucible is? Jamie, do you know what a crucible is? Yeah, okay, yeah. So one definition of a crucible is usually a ceramic or a metal container that's used to heat objects, melt objects, generally with the purpose of creating like an alloy, right? So mixing two things that generally wouldn't mix. But there's another definition. So another definition is a situation of severe trial or in which different elements interact to create something new. So crucibles are basically tests. They're trials. They're trial by fire, technically, is what it is. So the idea of that it's different elements that are interacting to create something new. So we think about what's going on in the COVID times. It's a perfect definition of a crucible. It's a perfect example of a crucible. Because not only is this a severe trial, because all of us have had to deal with so much stuff as a result of the quarantines, the forced shutdowns, the adjustments that have had to be made, but also because there's so many different elements that have been interacting. So if we think about some of the elements that have come together in a very marked way, we see, well, we have the health aspect of things. We have the social aspect of things. We have the economic. There has been such an increase in just general levels of stress and anxiety that have also created these very interesting stress points in terms of our societal structure. A lot of underlying tensions have been brought to the surface. So a lot of things have changed as a result of COVID. So one way I like to think about it is almost like what goes on in the process of a caterpillar entering a chrysalis. Right? So when that happens, we're in a period of isolation. And when a caterpillar goes in and then it emerges as a beautiful monarch butterfly or some other flying creature, their view of the world changes. Right? So when we're in this situation, we are looking at, as we exit from our chrysalis, we're looking at the world, and it's going to be a different world. And the question that we have to ask ourselves is, the reason that the world appears different, is it because that the world has changed or that we've changed? And me, I like to think it's a combination of the two, because the world is constantly changing. And this is an opportunity for us to either look at this period of time as a period of isolation or a period of metamorphosis. Right? Metamorphosis has a great connotation. Right? So we think about this, we're growing, we're changing, we're evolving, as opposed to isolation is where we're just stuck in this place and maybe to wither and die. So we want to think about these times as a time where there's great change that is going to occur. And one of those ways that we think about change now is this concept of the new normal. How many people hate the term new normal? Yes. All right. Well, yeah, it's definitely gotten overplayed. But here's the thing. The problem that most people have about a concept of new normal is because they don't like change. They don't want things to change. And normal sometimes gets confused with familiarity. Okay? That's really what we're fighting against. It's not against a new standard. It's just we don't want to let go of the old standard. But here's the truth. The old normal really wasn't working all that well for most of us. Okay? When you think about it, the number of people that are suffering from stress and anxiety pre-COVID, the number of people that were unemployed, the disenfranchised, the homeless. Yet normal does not work for everybody. So when we think about a new normal, that's actually a very exciting concept. Right? So just because something's familiar doesn't mean that it's good. Right? And just because it's comfortable doesn't mean that it's right. So when we think about embracing the new normal, this is embracing a mindset that change is inevitable, change is the only constant in the universe, and that this new reset that we have in front of us is an opportunity for us to create a much better environment for ourselves and for others. Okay? So we've already learned a bunch of stuff from this process. And here are the two biggest lessons that I've picked up. One, some things that we thought were impossible are quite possible. Right? So we're all here in this space, we're all co-workers, and we're used to working virtually. Not everybody is that way. And recently I was doing a presentation for a company, and it was a weekly training meeting that they've been having since COVID of all of the people in one of their departments. And these are people that generally didn't get to meet each other. They didn't get to work together because some were in Florida and some were in California and some were in New York. Right? But because of the situation, they needed to be able to pull everybody together. And in doing that and doing these Zoom kind of calls, people are getting to see the faces of people. They're starting to interact. They're starting to develop relationships. Besides just being on the same global team, they're developing personal relationships. So that's something that we wouldn't have thought is possible. Most traditional businesses didn't think that remote work was possible. Now we're seeing so many people shift to that. So we're finding out many things we thought were impossible are possible, and the other is our priorities may have been in the wrong place. Right? That to me has been a huge one, because we are, for better or worse, a society of doers. Right? We want to do, we want to achieve. And often we do that at the neglect of the most foundation needs that we have as human beings. The needs to connect, the need to provide, the need to be a part of something much greater than ourselves. And one of the things that I've noticed in the people around me is that because of the effects of COVID and how it's changed the way we do business, the way we interact, people are starting to really rethink their priorities. They're starting to make family a bigger priority. They're starting to make staying connected with friends a bigger priority. They're starting to make their mental and physical health a bigger priority. And so it's not about the hustle all the time. It's about making sure that we take care of ourselves. Right? So what's happened is we're given this potential to rebuild. As I said, with the new normal, everything is changing around us, and it's constantly changing. But we tend not to want to change a lot of foundation things because we're too comfortable with it, and we're afraid of messing things up. Well, guess what? Things are messed up right now. So if we've got to rebuild, if things have to change, why not change them for the better? Why not change them for the good? Right? So we can either rebuild the same structure that we've had for decades, or we can build a new structure. We can use the same materials that we had, so it's like repurposing, or we can use brand new materials. So what kind of world do we want to create? As we step into this new world, this post-COVID world, hopefully as we step into it, what do we want that world to look like? Okay. So remember that the only way to change things societally is that we have to change individually. And so Gandhi, very famous quote, become the change which to see in the world. So the idea is that society is just a gathering of individuals. Okay? So if we want to see this change occur in the societal sense, we have to start in an individual sense. And that is an internal process. So at this point, I think that one of the major points of friction that we're facing is the difference between a fixed mindset and a growth mindset. Okay? So the fixed mindset is, this is the way it is, it's never going to change. Growth mindset is, this is the way it is, but we have the ability to change. Okay? So if we want to see the world grow, if we want to see it expand, if we want to see it evolve, then we individually need to adopt and adapt to things by using a more growth-oriented mindset. Right? So we're dealing with a lot of stress at this time. But stress is not necessarily a bad word. Actually, stress is necessary. Right? When stress is put on something, it exposes its weaknesses. That's why they use it to test materials that they're going to use in manufacturing and in construction. That's why if you go to the doctor and you're having some health issues, they may give you a stress test. They want to see what you can handle. Right? So this time is testing the strength of our world, our country, our economy, and testing our strength as individuals. So we can either become fixated with the weaknesses that it brings out, or we can become focused on the strength that it shows. Right? So how many people have noticed that there are people who have cracked under the pressure of COVID? Right? We've seen people that have cracked, whether it be yourself, family, friends, employers, leadership. Right? We've seen a lot of people not step up to the plate. Okay? How many people have witnessed someone who showed a tremendous amount of strength? Yeah. So you see people, and a lot of times it's people that you don't expect, that are handling situations in a very, very strong and positive way. So stress is going to expose the weaknesses, but it's also going to showcase the strengths. So there's nothing wrong with exposing the weaknesses, right? We need to know where weaknesses are if we ever hope to fix them. But I think societally, we need to make sure that we look at this stress as the ability for us to figure out where do we need to redesign and where do we need to strengthen ourselves. Okay, now, how many people would agree with it that they're a little bit shocked with what happened in March when things went sideways? Yeah, I was in the hospital when all this came down. I had no idea that when I was coming out that I was going to be more isolated coming out of the hospital than I was in the hospital. So it was definitely a very shocking time. But shocking times can provide opportunity for growth. Now, if you have followed any of the stuff that I've been doing in terms of my blog posts, I do a weekly thing called Guidance from the I Ching. The I Ching is a Chinese wisdom text. Right? Basically, technically, the I Ching translates as the Book of Changes. And it's all about the nature of change. It's been used as a tool of divination, predictive modeling, leadership guidance. Basically uses a binary code. So this is a thousands of year old book, but basically what it is game theory. It's a predictive model of these are the conditions, these are the probable outcomes. And it's a really cool book and it's a lot of fun, but when this time came up, I consulted the I Ching, and I can explain that in depth someday. Maybe if people were interested, you can ask me about that. But this was the hexagram. This is the reading that I got, and it's called shocking. Imagine that. So I'm going to read to you what the I Ching actually says about shocking times. And listen to this with the idea of what we've gone through in COVID and see if this doesn't speak to you a little bit. Shocking brings progress. Shocking comes with a terrible noise, laughing and shouting with awesome glee. People are frightened for 100 miles around, yet the sacrificial vessel is not lost. Repeated arousing forms a condition for shocking. Therefore, an enlightened person, when badly frightened, seeks to improve themselves. The sudden force of stored and kinetic energy in the cosmos will be released in a powerful and shocking display. Like the awesome clap of a thunderbolt that explodes in the hushed moments before a storm, it will instill in the hearts of all who hear it an intense reverence and awareness of the overwhelming power of nature. All things in the cosmos will be aroused to movement through fear. This movement will be cautious, and cautious movement will bring progress. The time is like spring when new growth is aroused by the forces of nature. In human affairs, it can manifest itself as a shocking turn of events, an unpredictable cataclysmic occurrence inspired by invisible but irresistible forces. If your first reaction to this is fear and reverence, then good fortune will follow. A heightened experience of the forces that affect your life will bring you into close contact with the inner workings of your nature. You can examine your reactions and thereby determine how best to strengthen your character. Once the shocking event has passed, like the thunderbolt before the storm, the taut readiness of your awareness and caution will be released in joy. Surviving this terrible force will give you confidence in your ability to deal with all that follows. If you can learn to react virtuous, accord, and maintain your composure, success is truly yours. This composure and inner strength are the marks of true leaders, persons who can greatly benefit society. During times of shock, you will have the opportunity to make new gains in social influence by handling yourself with tranquility and poise. This is a good time to examine your relationship to all of your external affairs. Carry on with whatever you are engaged in, but be certain that you have most of the elements of your life under control. Affairs that are pending and unfinished business will cause difficulties during shocking times. Yet if these times inspire you to make innovative changes in your life, in your relationships, and in yourself, you will meet with vitality and success. Okay, does that sound even vaguely familiar to you? Does that sound like what we're going through right now? To me, what the things that spoke to me the most was the idea that if you act with reverence and fear, right? Fear is not necessarily a bad thing. Fear is a necessary emotion, right? But if you approach the situation of these cataclysmic unseen forces, which I thought was also very profound, if you approach them with reverence and the right amount of fear, then you have the success. Okay? The problems that we've been experiencing societally have been because people have not taken the threat as seriously as they should in many cases. Okay? People are not looking to learn from the situation. Right? They're just wanting to rush back into the old normal. So there's all of these opportunities that present themselves through this time. But unless you understand that there are opportunities, you're never going to seize them. So what I wanted to dive into here is that we're suffering from a societal, actually a global form of PTSD. And not everyone first accepts that. And for the people who do accept it, not everyone has strategies in place to deal with those issues. So what I want to do is present to you 4 simple strategies that we can use to turn post-traumatic stress into post-traumatic healing. Excuse me. So in 2005, there was a study done published by the University of Toronto, and it was on the psychological effects of SARS-related quarantine. So 2005, SARS, 15 years later, here we are with COVID. Now, the quarantine levels in 2005 were nowhere near what we've experienced as a result of COVID. Okay? But here's what this study found. That because of the quarantine, there were increased feelings of isolation among all the participants in the study. More than 50% found that they felt that they were treated differently as a result of the quarantine. Right? So there's a stigma that's associated with it. And that the longer the quarantine lasted, the more severe the symptoms. Now again, remember 2005 SARS, if any of you remember that period of time, it was a big deal, but nowhere as big of a deal as COVID is right now. Right? The quarantine periods much, much shorter, the impact much less. So if we look at this and then imagine that being amplified 10-fold, 20-fold, 100-fold, that's what we're dealing with right now. Right? A piece written by is a viewpoint published in the Journal of American Medical Association Psychiatry called Suicide, Mortality, and Coronavirus Disease, A Perfect Storm. Okay? So what the author presented was that there's this confluence of unique elements that in and of themselves are bad enough, because suicide is a huge problem that we're facing in our society pre-COVID, but as a result of COVID, they predicted that there was going to be increases because of the confluence of economic stress, social isolation, decreased access to community, religious, and professional support, nationwide anxiety. Anxiety is like a wildfire that's going on in California right now on the West Coast. Right? Once it starts, it keeps spreading, and it spreads faster. I mean, healthcare professionals at high risk. Healthcare professionals are amongst, if not the most stressed professionals in the world. Right? They deal with more stress than anyone else. And the idea that now we have to add onto it the stress of what's going on societally with COVID. And firearm sales. Right? So this is not going to be a pro or anti-Second Amendment statement, but the most popular method of suicide is firearm related. And firearm sales tend to go up when there is any level of social unevenness, unsteadiness, upheavals. Okay? So we've seen increases in all of these things. To date, I have not been able to find any very significantly hard statistics other than the fact that I was reading that CDC released some information that from 30 days before COVID to this point, the study was released in June, that the respondents are showing thoughts of suicidal thoughts, increasing from 4.3% of the people reporting it to 10 point something. So it's more than doubled. So that's something to really keep in mind, that these are all things that are going on. Now, what can we do about it? Right? Obviously, hiding under the blankets, putting our head in the sand is not going to change things. Denying these facts isn't going to change things. But of course, we all know how good we are at denying science. It's not true. It's not real. Okay? No, this is all real. This is stuff that's going on. And these are things that need to be addressed. So I have 4 simple strategies I want to present to you. And they're real easy to do. Anybody can do it. And please share this with people. Right? First one, ease in. Second one, keep what works. Third one, I call flip the script. And fourth, be a friend. Be a buddy. Okay, so ease in. One of the biggest problems that we're having right now is because we were in such a rush to get things back, to open things back up. Okay, so what immediately happened when we opened things up? This is recent history.
Go back to the way things were.
Curve goes back up. All right? So what do we want to do? We just want to go faster, faster, faster. We want to open things up. So we don't want to rush back into things because that's what's biting us in the butt. Okay? So not only did it happen in terms of the numbers, but it also affects us psychologically. Right? Because our rush to get back to the old way of doing things, the old normal, puts a lot of unnecessary stress on us. Right? Because things are not going to, as we said before, things are not going to return to the way they were. And if we rush into it expecting that everything's going to be exactly the way it was, we set ourselves up for failure. We set ourselves up for disappointment. We set ourselves up for all of these additional psychological stressors. So don't be in a rush. Add things to your plate one at a time. And how many of you cut things out of your life as a result of the COVID situation? Okay? And again, what do people want to do? They want to rush right back to everything the way it was, which means working the same amount of hours, doing the same amount of activities, just want to do everything again. That's not a good solution. Again, it's going to add more stress and more anxiety to you in the process. So as you're going back, as we begin to transition back into life outside of the social distancing, it's very important that you just add things one at a time. Ease yourself into the process. Right? There's no rush to get back to where you were because, as I said before, the old normal wasn't working for most of us anyway. So don't be in a rush to get back there. Reprioritize your commitments. Right? How many people do you know that were so bummed out and probably are still bummed out that they can't go out to the nightclub? Right? They can't go to the football game. Right? Those things in their mind, or in their reality as it was, were priorities. What do our priorities need to be? Our commitments need to be first and foremost to our own health and well-being. Right? Because if you're not well, you can't take care of others. You can't contribute to society. So this is an opportunity for us to reprioritize as we are adding things in this ease-in concept. As you're adding things in one at a time, make sure the things that you're adding are the most important things. One of my favorite authors, coaches, Brendan Burchard, has a saying that I love to use. It's the main thing is to keep the main thing the main thing. So when we think about our priorities, make sure that you're keeping the main thing the main thing. Add in the things that are the most essential first and foremost. Okay, keep what works. Everybody has stuff that they have done, either new stuff they've done or they've increased intensity on things during the pandemic as ways to keep themselves physically and mentally healthy. Right? So let me ask you, what are some of the things that you have added to your life as a result of this? Meditation. Okay. What else? Anybody else?
Exercise.
More time with family.
Routine.
Routine.
Gardening.
Gardening. Okay? Like for me, it's been like having family dinners, taking a walk with my wife every night, and having weekly phone conversations with my mother and my sister. Right? Those are things that I didn't always do prior to this. Okay? So, here's the thing. If these activities are important enough for us to do today, why would we want to stop tomorrow? Why should we stop? Should we stop? And I think this is one of the things that people begin to do, and this goes back to our idea of our commitments and our priorities, is that it's very easy to overlook these things. And once the opportunity comes where things are more open, the first things that we're going to start getting rid of are these self-care activities. Don't fall into that trap. Don't fall into that trap. You out there, don't fall into that trap. If it's working now, it will continue to work. If it's important enough to do now, it is more than important enough to do when things have relaxed. Okay, flip the script. Flip the script is a mental exercise. How you define a situation determines your response and its outcome. This relates to yin-yang theory, and if you know me well enough, you know I'm all about yin-yang theory. Everything in life that we deal with, it's an event. Okay? And events have actually no negative or positive connotation. We define it. Okay? Even with COVID, right, we can say this is, right now, we can say this is probably the worst thing that's happened to us as a society so far. Give it time. It is an election year. But maybe 10 years down the line, 20 years, 30, we'll look back and we'll see changes that have occurred that has pushed us societally forward. It has evolved us as a race, as a species. And then, will we still look at it the same way? Probably not. Okay? So, our ability to define is based on our perspective, how we're looking at things. So, my tagline is, it is what it is, it becomes what you make of it. Okay? So, am I happy about the COVID situation? Not particularly. Am I getting benefit from it? Absolutely. Right? It's created some hardships for me, but it's also opened a lot of doors for me. It's helped me to realign some of my priorities. It's helped me to focus a lot more on things that are truly important to me. So I have to take the good with the bad, right? Because it's going to become what I make of it. So if you can define the outcome, it's through this process I call flipping the script. So one of the big things we deal with is grief. Grief we're all going through because we feel like we have lost something, and we have lost something. We've lost our sense of normalcy. We've lost that consistency. We've lost a lot of things. And that's natural to grieve, but it's possible to turn grief into gratitude. Okay? So how does that work? And so what are some of the things that we might have lost as a result of this process?
Vacation.
Lost vacation. Lost touch. Yeah. What was that?
Celebration.
Lost celebration.
Revenue.
Lost revenue. Yeah.
Patience.
Lost patience. Okay. So we've lost some things. Yeah. But here's a way of thinking about it. When you lose something, it creates a hole or a vacuum. What's one law of nature? Nature abhors a vacuum. Something is going to fill it up. So we get to choose, though, what we fill it up with. So when we're dealing with ideas of grief and gratitude, there are things that we may, there are people who have lost other people, right? We've lost people to COVID, right? You can grieve the loss, but you can still develop gratitude out of that, because that person who you lost, if you're really grieving them, that probably means that they were special to you. And if they were special to you, they had impact on you. If they had impact on you, they brought you something. They maybe brought you joy in your life, to borrow Paul's favorite word. They made you lattes and brought you peppers, like Jamie. They picked up sandwiches for you, like Austin. Right? So you can be grateful for the things that you did have, right? You can be grateful for the things that you did have, or you can grieve the things you've lost. It's just a mind shift, right? So you can focus on the things that you did get, the things that you still have, the opportunities that you still have. And actually, I've got coming up, this is a little plug for the Candy Factory Collective. My episode for next week on my Mastering the Mindful Mindset mini is going to be on gratitude, right? How to use gratitude as a powerful tool, for mindfulness tool. So I'll go into a lot of detail on that, at least 15 minutes worth of detail on that next week. So make sure you're following the minis. Hey, so this is the first we need: turn grief into gratitude. Turn uncertainty into possibility. Right? I've heard so many people say that they're frustrated, they're stressed and anxious because they feel like life has become so uncertain. It's become so unpredictable. And I feel for them, I empathize with them, but I also want to slap them upside the head. Because life has always been and will always be unpredictable. We don't know what's going to happen from one moment to the next. We like to pretend that we do. And what COVID did was kind of stripped away the veneer that we had control over things. And as humans, we don't like to admit that we don't have control. So uncertainty is a certainty. There will always be uncertainty. But here's the thing about uncertainty. Uncertainty means you don't know what's going to happen next, right? What about possibility? Possibility means that you don't know what's going to happen next. Okay? It's not fixed. So if one is, I don't know what's going to happen next, anything could happen, that's a negative way of looking at it. Possibility is, hey, I don't know what's going to happen next, but there's some opportunity there. There's some potential there. It's a mindset shift. Okay? So we don't know what life post-COVID is going to look like. But there's tons of possibility there. Do you know that the Great Depression generated more wealth for many people than any other period in our history? Like collectively, if we start looking at things like converting a dollar to the modern day dollar. So many great fortunes were made at that time. Why? When everybody else was losing their shirts, and some people became wealthy beyond imagination. They saw the possibility. They saw opportunity. So while things are bad now, we have the possibility as things are being rebuilt to rebuild them in a way that's more productive for us. Turn anxiousness into excitement. Biochemically, neurochemically speaking, there is no difference between the feeling of nervousness and the feeling of excitement. Same neurotransmitters going on, brains functioning about the same way. The physiological responses are fundamentally the same way. Heart starts racing, breathing comes up a little bit. Right? One is a negative connotation, the other is a positive connotation. Okay? These both come from the unknown. Right? You're anxious because you don't know what's going to happen. You're excited because of the potential of what's going to happen. Right? This is a lesson that I learned as a martial artist. I actually started as a musician. I used to have a lot of stage fright. I had a lot of anxiety about performing. As I learned that there is no difference between those two, every time I felt those butterflies, I stopped thinking about it and in terms of, oh my God, this is my body warning me that I'm going to probably mess up. And started thinking about it as, oh, this is my body telling me it's geared up. Right? It's getting ready. It's getting ready to do something exciting. So anxiousness into excitement. When you feel that uncertainty, go back to the idea that we're in this infinite sea of probability. Right? The quantum field. Right? Anything can happen. We can make it happen. So don't be nervous about it. Be excited about it. Because excitement will move you forward. Anxiety will hold you back. So if we want to make positive changes, you have to think about how can you turn your anxiousness into excitement. And turn fear into faith. Fear is the result of ignorance. And I don't mean like ignorant. I mean that you just don't have knowledge. You don't understand something. You don't know. Faith comes from knowledge. Okay? So when we feel fear, that's a sign that we are lacking in our knowledge. We don't know. We don't understand. So to turn fear into faith just means that we have to do what? Learn something. Get the knowledge. Okay? So if you're anything like me, I love to learn. I love to gain skill. I love to get better. So whenever I feel that fear, and saying feel fear is like a tongue twister. Whenever you start to feel the fear, for me, it's a signal that I have an opportunity to learn. And that immediately changes it from this thing that I want to avoid to something that I want to embrace. Okay? So we have to think about, fear. When you're fearful, you're in the dark. When you have faith, you're enlightened. Okay? So when you start to feel fear, search for answers. Now, of course, in our current society, one of the biggest problems that we're dealing with is the fact that the sources of information are not always accurate. So media tends to feed on fear. Right? It wants to continue to promote fear as opposed to providing you answers and wisdom that will help to calm the fears. So if you are getting fearful over things, first try to get as much information as possible, and then if you're still feeling fearful, then make sure that you're getting your information from a variety of sources, and make sure that the well is not poisoned. All right, and the final component is be a friend. All right. Social distancing does not have to mean social isolation. And I think this is one of the things that has created a problem for a lot of us, is that we went into super self-protective mode and shut ourselves out from people. So remember that technology has advanced to the point where we can communicate with each other virtually. And, like my mom, God love her, my mom is in her early 80s. She is definitely not techno-savvy. So I can't do Zoom calls with her, but we did get her an iPhone so that we can at least FaceTime. And so, 30 years ago, the only way to communicate was just on the phone, just hearing voices. Now she can see our faces. She can see her new great-granddaughter. Right? So just because we're physically separated doesn't mean that we have to be emotionally separated. So it's really crucial that we maintain contact. And while virtual is not preferred in many ways, it is just as real. Yeah. It is just as real. It's important to understand that we are not alone in what we're experiencing. Right? So if you have someone in your life who's struggling right now with the effects of COVID, it's important to let them know that we're all feeling that way. Every one of us. Now, everybody deals with the stress and the grief and the fear differently, and you have a different curve. But we're all going through it. So it's important that we express to others that we know what they're going through. And this is a big one. The times are crazy, not you. A lot of people feel like they're going nuts. Yeah, I'm losing my touch with reality. No, the times are crazy. You're not. Help people to understand that. Share what has worked for you. So all the things we talked about earlier, meditation, spending more family time, or some of the other things that came out. Gardening, routine, all those things, the things that have worked for you, share them with other people. Say, I know you're having a tough time, Austin. You know what helped me? This. Okay? Because people are looking for answers. Point people to helpful resources, things like what we're doing today. People need help. We all need help. So there are lots of resources. If there's something that's helped you, make sure that you share it with someone that you care about. Make social reintegration comfortable. How many of you are starting to expand your little social bubbles? Okay? Everybody's got a different comfort level. Okay? So we want to make sure that we're trying to get people reintegrated step by step. But we want to make sure that they are comfortable with the way that that occurs. So we're going to have some people that are, screw it, everything's open, mask off, give you a big hug. We need to let them know that maybe we aren't comfortable with it. Maybe someone who's exceptionally conservative in their wanting to step outside the bubble, right? Don't invite them to a party with 30 people. Maybe just take them out to dinner, just 2 people. Then, as they get comfortable, then add more. Start to expand slowly, as I said before, step by step. But it's important that it be done in a very loving way. We want to be persistent with getting people out of their shell, but we don't want to pressure people. And this is the last one, and in many ways maybe the most important. Just listen. Often we just need to be heard. We need to be able to express what we're feeling. So be an ear for someone who needs to get things off of their chest. Be a shoulder to cry on. There's a lot of power in just listening and just being a friend. All right? So that wraps up my presentation. Does anyone have any questions, comments, feedback, additions, subtractions, long division? Yes? Yeah.
So, an instance where I experienced my anxiety to reach higher points after COVID was that I was locked into the same place for such a long period of time that I became very attached to everything that was around me. That's all I had for such a long period of time. Now that whenever I leave, I'm paranoid that I might have left something behind, maybe left something on, the door unlocks. It's brought to where my anxiety feels like I'm driving halfway to somewhere, I do a complete 180 to go make sure that even if everything is okay, when the door is locked or whatever, it still mentally affects me. That I feel like if I don't do it, it hurts. And I feel like that's increased after COVID. Is there ways to kind of like distract yourself or work through those ways?
Yeah, I mean, there's lots of things you can do to either desensitize yourself to like the separation anxiety. There are things like, simple things like checklists. Yeah, create a checklist, turned off stove, locked door, check them off, and then when you start to feel anxious, hey, unless you forget to check something off, and then make that on your checklist. Make sure, checklist. But yeah, that's one way, and it's a step at a time. And I think a lot of times we expect change to happen dramatically and immediately, and sometimes it just takes a little bit of time to do it. But yeah, that would be my suggestion. Just start small. Anybody else?
PTSD. I'm here on Thursdays for the Veterans Court, and the judge there has declared that D is not allowed. It's not incest, it's not disorder, post-traumatic stress. I agree with that.
Yeah. 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 So it.
Too often we think of it. PTSD, but he said, no, in this courtroom, we're not using the D. It's post-traumatic stress.
Yeah. Us? Greg, got anything? Anything to share? Insights? All right. Well, thank you for your attention. And anybody has any questions at any other point, you can always email me. If you see me around, grab me. And like I said, make sure you check out the next episode of Mastering the Mindful Mindset on the Candy Factory Collective, where I'm going to talk about gratitude and how that's a powerful tool. And I think right now it's very easy for us to be trapped in the loop of all that we have lost when we still have so much going on right now to be grateful for. So keep the gratitude and eat some sandwiches. Thank you, Ann. I'm grateful to you and the Candy Factory. All right.